Hey guys, welcome to part 3 of rebuilding the lower unit for this 1973 18-horse Evinrude. Let's get this thing all buttoned up and get it back on the motor. And that should have our lower unit basically put back together again. Put our shear pin in. And yeah, I know it's full of grubby mechanics tracks, but I wanted to make sure that that felt good. There's no binding, there's no chunka going on. That feels pretty good. There's our cotter pin lined up. Let me grab another cotter key and we'll throw it in there. That one's a little small. That one's a little big. Oh, nope, that one goes in nice. It's a little on the long side, but we can fix that just like we did the last one. There's the side cutters. And we're going to pull the cover plate off the water pickup just to make sure that there's not a bunch of mud dauber wasp nest or something like that. Something packed in there, a bunch of old dried up weeds, something that's going to prevent us from... Yeah, there's a little bit of stuff in there. It was definitely worth taking off. Put this back in, put it the right way around so that the holes are as low as they can go. Put a little bit of the gasket compound on the threads just so they don't get stuck in the future. I don't know, it seems counterintuitive to using gasket glue on threads, but supposedly it's okay. We've got two nice little nylon rings that go on to the oil plugs. Those down in place. We'll just temporarily install the oil plugs over on the other side here. Obviously, when we go to get the lower unit back into the motor, we'll need to fill those up. Definitely don't want to run the lower unit without any oil. That would not end well. Now we have our shiny new water pump that needs to get installed. Interestingly, this water pump only uses 3 of the 4 bolts that we have holes for in the actual base of the unit. There's 4 holes there, but as you can see here, we only use 3 of them. We've got our shiny new wear plate. The water outlet comes out behind the basically comes out between the main input shaft and the shifter. Our wear plate goes in. There's a slight dome to the top of it, and there's a notch that goes down and lines up with the shift shaft so that it doesn't bind. If you have it rotated in the wrong position, the outer lip of the wear plate will push against the shift shaft and make it so that things don't shift properly. We get 3 nice shiny new screws and a new pin for the impeller. Put a little bit of grease on the impeller pin so that it stays in its hole. We've got our nice shiny new, although it's definitely discolored, but it is a shiny new impeller housing. I'm going to use some white lithium grease on this. It's lighter than the triple guard, and we want to put it in here and smear it around. Basically what we're doing here is we are pre-lubricating the impeller so that it doesn't burn itself out before it gets water. You could also use dish soap or something like that, but lithium grease works pretty good. Now the trick here is we want to work the impeller. I want to work the impeller into the housing, get it so that it approximately lines up, work it down over top of the main input shaft, which might take a little bit of tweaking to get it to go, because the impeller is off-centered in the hole. You can see the impeller is off-centered in the hole. We've kind of got to line it up. Plus, the impeller is a little bit sticky about going down over top of the shaft. Put a little bit of grease on it. And now we got to get rid of some of the slime off the hands. We take our nice shiny new 3 bolts, put a little bit of the gasket sealing compound on them, and we work them down through the wear plate. I don't want to snug them all up until we get all 3 started. All 3 are snugged up. A combination of the triple guard and lithium grease that was up on the top probably would have been adequate, but we did get some nice shiny new moly lube that came in a little envelope, so we'll use that. The O-ring that was up there is perfectly fine, so we'll just reuse it, mainly because I don't have another one. And there's the moly lube that came from BRP to lubricate the top of the shaft. I don't know if that's in front of the camera or not. There we are. So we are basically ready to, well, almost ready to shove this thing back up in place. Last piece we have left is this spool. Kind of goes down over top of the input shaft and essentially seals the top of the water pump from getting exposed to exhaust gases. You notice there's a thick band here and a thin band here, a thick O-ring and a thin O-ring. The thin O-ring goes on the thick end and the thicker O-ring goes on the thinner end. We'll put a little bit of gasket sealing compound on the O-rings. These, I had to reuse these O-rings. I didn't get new ones with either one of these kits, and I don't have any of that size. So the larger O-ring goes down into the water pump housing, and then this will go up into the tube that goes up to the bottom of the engine. Water tube will fit in here, I believe, if I remember correctly. There was a rubber grommet. Yes. Rubber grommet that goes in there. I'm kind of surprised we didn't get a new one, given that we bought a genuine BRP kit, but I just take a punch and we can force that out of there. This one is still relatively pliable, which after almost 50 years is somewhat impressive. Clean the exhaust gas off of the shifter linkage, and then we're basically ready to reinstall. We've got our screws cleaned up. They go with internal star washers and thread into the shift coupler. The tricky part, of course, is getting it to engage in the groove that's in the end of the rod here. We've got this groove and the screw has to go through that. You don't want to have it on too far. You want to have it on far enough that you're grabbing. If you have a hard time getting the screw to start, chances are that you are not lined up with the groove in that shift rod. And as you can see, the end of the bolt has come out through the hole. That is basically it. We are ready to put this back in. I'm going to put a little bit more of this gasket goo on the O-ring, just because I bumped it with my hand a couple of times. Got all sticky. And we're lubed up at the top. That's important. Probably wouldn't hurt just to throw a little bit of lube so that the water tube falls in there nicely. We grab a bolt so that when we get everything lined up kind of sort of where we need to be, we can put a bolt in it. And I think basically we're ready to stick this lower unit back in place. Let me move the camera over so you guys can see that. That looks like an okay angle. I must say that the lower unit for an 18 horse is much easier to handle than the lower unit is for a 120 horse force. So I can't really put you in here because I can just barely see it myself, but the water tube has engaged with the water pump. We are engaging in the spline, and the nifty little shift block is kind of sort of wanting to behave itself. Okay. One thing you want to be very careful of when you're doing this is you want to make sure that it seats completely, just like it just did for me. If you're bolting it together, like if you're forcing it together with the bolts, then you've got something that is not put together properly. I can't quite get my fingers in on the bolt to snug it up, but the lower unit does fit up in place, so we'll use a wrench just to get the bolt started. I think we want to put some of that gasket sealing compound on these bolts. Anyways, put our large bolt that goes down through the top, and our final small bolt. I'm Using wrenches to snug these up, just so that I can get a feel for it. If something's going wrong, if I'm having to put extra pressure on it, it's much easier to feel with just a wrench than it is to feel with a power tool, or even a ratchet for that matter. And I'm not feeling any binding or anything that really is giving me any concern here. 4 smaller ones are snugged up, and the big one's snugged up. Now we have our shifter linkage that we need to get lined up and get the final bolt in. Just ever so slightly misaligned. And we are locked in. Now we'll put our second little bolt in here. And this would really suck if we dropped this, because then we'd have to go fishing down in the lower above the water pump to retrieve it. We don't really want to do that. I see a problem. Okay, the problem that we have is that we are flipped 180 degrees from where we need to be. How that happened, I don't know. But that's where we're supposed to be, right there. Snug it up with a larger screwdriver, because the ratchet doesn't want to fit on there very well. Both of those are good and tight. So, neutral. We turn it. That feels good. Forward. Engages. Reverse. Engages. I think we're in good shape. One last thing we need to do is we need to make sure we get oil in it. Let's pull our oil plugs out. We pump in the oil. I don't know how well you guys can see that until we get oil coming out, or until we get oil coming out the top hole. Then we put the plug back in. And plug back in. Last but not least, we put the cover back on. Now, ideally, it'd be nice to have a nice shiny new gasket to put on there, but we don't. We make do with what we've got. Well, guys, I think I've taken it as far as I want to today. Check back for the next video, and we're going to do a barrel test here in the shop, and then we'll take it to the lake and see how it runs on a boat. I've got a nice 12-foot skiff that we'll bolt it up to and see how it's going to perform. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Appreciate you watching. If you got this far, can you throw me a thumb up? Greatly appreciated. And maybe hit that subscribe button and ring the bell icon. Get more content from Doug's Messy Garage. Would greatly appreciate that. We'll catch you in the next mess.